Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. I'm Elizabeth Corey, and I'm the founder of beatingtrauma.com, and this is our weekly Tuesday live stream. Today, I am going to be talking to you about tolerance. A lot of people come to me and tell me that they want to do this work so they can get better at tolerating their life. Like being able to be in situations where, they can just kind of cope with what's happening around them. And well, yes, there's some good things behind that objective. What I tend to find is that a lot of times what they mean is that they want to be better at tolerating abuse, okay? And this is not what we want. The problem, though, is the messages we get from society. So I want to talk a little bit about those because we live in a world where human beings will even go as far as bragging about how much abuse they take, right? They don't call it abuse when they brag about it. They just kind of talk about it as if it's like they're so strong because they're putting up with so much, and that makes them really strong, right? To run themselves into the ground is a strength. I put down some different quotes that I've heard over the years that I thought I'd share with you. For example, I work 70 hours per week. I don't need any rest or vacation. Those things are for wimps. I can go all day on 3 hours of sleep. I used to belong to this volunteer organization, which now, unfortunately, I'm starting to realize it was kind of a little bit cult-like in the way they behave. They used to say, "I'll sleep when I'm dead." That was the phrase they used. And all of these things are said as if they are a great thing. Look at what I can tolerate. Look at what I can put up with on a daily basis. Look at how much strength I have because I can go through all of these things and I'm still okay. Now, you might have already figured it out just by, listening to my previous live streams and whatnot, that this is a controller behavior. This is a controller view of the world. So today we're talking about controller view, where they actually apply really positive traits and strength and power and all of that as like a benefit to tolerating really bad scenarios, abusive scenarios. Again, they're not going to call them abusive because nobody would think it was a strength to tolerate abuse. However, when you really get down and look at it, it's abusive, right? So another group of phrases I've heard, especially more recently, as the new generation comes up in the world today, they've been kind of getting known for taking a different approach. They may be, not tolerating the same things that maybe previous generations have tolerated, right? And so what I'm hearing, because I am a member of one of the two primarily older generations that we have right now, especially here in the United States, we have the boomers, we have Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer, but honestly, Gen X is usually the forgotten generation. Nobody remembers to include us in those comparisons, right? Because the millennials and the Gen Zers, they tend to have a slightly different approach to the way they look at, let's say, the workplace or, how they want to show up in the world. And so what I hear from those older generations, believe me, I may be Gen X, so I'm not agreeing with these phrases, but we hear things like, these kids are wimps, right? These kids are wimps. They want so much, but they don't want to pay their dues. Right. And sometimes we may even hear phrases about, I had to put up with it. Why shouldn't the next generation have to put up with it? Now, if you're listening to me, you're already well aware that this kind of attitude promotes generational trauma and continues cyclical patterns that are totally not okay, right? So you guys already know that, but we still hear it a lot out there, especially from people who are older and have been through a lot, okay? And I get it. They have been through a lot. That's true, right? the one that I always come back to in regards to this, and it is probably one of the most famous phrases out there in the world, which is, I walked uphill in the snow to get to school, like that phrase, right? That is sort of kind of feeds into this whole mentality that I'm talking about today, which is we really do wear tolerance as a badge of honor. And that badge of honor is specifically the controller's badge of honor. It's not that every single part in the system actually wants to live that way, but the controller does see tolerance of abusive situations and abusive environments as a positive thing. They see it as a strength, right? In reality, it's a weakness. And I'm going to tell you why, because I just heard all the collective controllers out there screaming, no. Oh, okay. But I want to tell you why it's actually not a strength. And it's a weakness to tolerate abuse, right? And I don't mean that those of us who have grown up in these horrific situations who tolerate abuse, that we are weak. I'm just saying that when we are tolerating abuse, we are usually kind of giving into the fears of the controller, right? We're not actually being strong. We're letting our fears win. So I want to talk about that and why that is, because I think it brings in a very different perspective and maybe can begin to allow us to tolerate a little bit less in our lives, which is exactly what we should be tolerating, much less than we are now. So because when we were children, our controllers felt powerless in the face of, abuse, abusive forces, abusive people, they really had to choose a survival skill that appeased other people, right? So this is sort of where this all comes from. It's based in the fear that we don't have any power and that the only thing we can really do is tolerate what's happening around us. We can't stand up for ourselves. We can't stand up for what we want and what we need. We have to continue tolerating a bad environment. As a child, that was true, right? That was actually exactly the scenario we were in. So the controller developed this survival strategy that's based on being trapped in an abusive situation that they could not get out of. And this is where we get confused. Because to them, the controller, they believe that the easier decision is to not rock the boat. Now, to be fair, as a child, it may have been the only decision, right? But often the better decision is to face our fears in the short term so that we can make things better in the long term. So we have to fight that urge to use a painful life as a sign of strength, okay? Instead, we need to face those fears so that we can stand up for ourselves and create a life that is less painful. Again, coming back to this idea that tolerance of a painful life is a good thing. It shows some kind of character in us. If we do that, that's a story the controller tells us. That's not reality. And don't get me wrong, it's not just our controller that tells us that. It's society's controller, right? It's that macro controller that we are hearing that says this is a good thing. And so while we may be buying into it for ourselves, and that's what we're going to talk about today, we also have to remember that society and what I call the macro controller and the people who do benefit from our tolerance of their abuse are going to continue to try to make us think this is okay, right? So the controller has backup because of that, right? They have that sort of macro controller backing them up on this. So it's very hard to see that this is not the scenario, right? That what the controller says isn't actually right. So I'm going to throw out some writing prompts that are kind of based on the controller's fears so we can talk about behind all this tough talk, behind all of this, I can tolerate anything conversation that is happening externally, there is a lot of fear, right? And that's really what we want to get to. We want to get to that so we can start being strong in a new way that really helps us change our lives and change our patterns in the process. So this idea, these prompts, I kind of group them into several categories here. So the first fear I'm going to talk about is the controller is afraid they will not be liked. Now, controller got this way often for very good reasons, because it was very important for them to please others as a child. So they took on this role of making sure that whenever they chose to do something, they did it in a way that would make them liked. And so some of the prompts, when you hear resistance to standing up for yourself, some of the prompts that you might want to try writing from here would be, don't rock the boat. It'll just cause problems. So that's a prompt you can use to connect with your controller's fears. Another one, you will be the outcast. So remember, it's like we're trying to be included. We're trying to be liked. We don't want to be on the outside. That's not, like, as a child, that would have been horrific. So that's still the fear that's sitting in the system that the controller is sort of running with, basically. And then if you are nice, like if you are a nice person, they are going to treat you better. So this comes into that idea that as a child, maybe we were blaming ourselves for the abuse we were experiencing, because oftentimes we do. And so the controller came up with this idea that if I can just be better, like the best version of self, like, do all the things productive and, achieving everything I need to achieve, then maybe I'll be treated better. This can play in, especially when we're children, this can play in school. Like, I'll just do really, really well in school and then they'll treat me better. I'll do really well in school and then they'll see me in a better light, right? So it's the same idea, except oftentimes when we're adults, it starts being translated into our work environment or other environments, family environments. And we're like, if I can just do better, if I could just be more, if I can just whatever, figure it out, they'll treat me better. But the truth is that oftentimes if people are treating you poorly, that's not going to stop, right? So that's the first group of writing prompts you could try that kind of come out of that fear of not being liked. The next controller fear I want to talk about is actually similar to that one, but a little bit more extreme and can get into some karma kid fears too, which is I will make enemies. Because oftentimes in our childhood, we may have done something to protect ourselves and we experienced retaliation. Like we experienced something really negative coming back at us. That is often the case in abusive environments, because these kind of abusers need children to know that they cannot and will not stand up for themselves. It makes children a whole lot easier to control if those children are experiencing really, really negative consequences for choosing to stand up for themselves. So in this case, this idea of we will make enemies. This is a prompt, they will retaliate if I stand up for myself, right? Like they will retaliate. They will come after me, right? And don't get me wrong, there may be experiences where people retaliate or don't like you because you stand up for yourself. The issue isn't the argument isn't whether or not that's going to happen. Okay, many times things like that will. The argument is how our power has shifted now as adults. Oftentimes we have more avenues we can pursue to keep ourselves safe from this kind of thing that we didn't have as children. There was nothing available to us as children. There was no options for us. That isn't true in our adult lives. But while we have these fears really kind of coming at us, it feels like that's the case, right? So working with the fear, writing from those fears can sometimes show us other approaches we could take. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about here is another big controller fear, which is we need to tolerate this abuse for money. Okay, controllers will almost always put money for our quality of life. And I'll be honest, some of the people who want to control us, keep us working into the ground, they bank on that, right? They bank on that being the case. So oftentimes we will hear fears from our controller like it is not financially responsible to do this. We have to put money first. Controllers, by the way, always put money first, generally speaking. You have to deal with this pain to invest in our future. Okay. And these things, when we tolerate abuse, very often we put this sort of fiscally responsible or financially responsible, spin on it, which really does keep us from questioning it, because in our society especially, we live in a world where making decisions for the sake of money are almost always considered the right decisions. It's only once we really start connecting with our grounded self, when we really connect deeply into who we are intuitively, that we can break out of that pattern. And I'll be honest, even then it's very challenging. The best decisions I've made in my life thus far have been when I have taken money out of the equation and said, what do I want or need to do here for my own well-being? But I will tell you, it was never easy. And it came with a tremendous amount of writing from the controller to make it happen. And none of that controller writing was particularly nice or kind. A lot of condescension, a lot. But underneath that was tons and tons and tons of fear from them, because controllers often do see money as safety. Money is going to be what keeps us safe. And the number one thing the controller cares about is safety. I mean, it's pretty much the only thing. Like, they're just, safety is it, right? They're in full survival mode. Okay. So tolerating abuse to them, it's just another day. It's just a drop in the bucket. They're just trying to get through life. Like, that's it. There's no, the idea that we could have some kind of fulfilling life or do something around a purpose or enjoy our days. Yeah, that's not in the picture for the controller, which is part of the problem. So that next fear is money first. So the next fear that I want to talk about is sort of a fake fear, I guess. I mean, it's more used as a way of manipulating us. Yes, controllers manipulate, because controllers actually absorb strategies from our abusers. So if our abusers manipulate and gaslight, so do controllers. So we need to keep that in mind. Like, we literally have something in our mind that is being totally truthful with us. And that's hard to take in, actually. It's like, great, I'm my own worst enemy. To some degree, yeah, that is actually true. But once we become aware of it, there are things we can do about it. We don't have to be powerless to that. So I want to stress that. But one of the big things the controller will say is, we don't have time. We're too busy. Now, this can be a too busy thing, or it can be we don't have the energy thing. And what tends to happen with controllers is they're never too busy for the things they want to do, but they're always too busy for the things they're afraid of, okay? And that's how they approach it. So again, that's sort of where the manipulation piece of it comes in, right? It comes in there and it's like, we don't have time for this. Like there's no way, there's too much to get done. There's no way I can take something like this on. I can't go down this road. It'll take too much time and energy, and I've already got too many things to do. Right? And controller has this amazing ability to make us more busy when we are starting to debate whether or not we want to make a change. Because of course, making a change does take time and resources. It does take time and energy. And the controller knows that. So they will often be like, there's no time, there's no space, there's no way to do this, we can't do it. But really what it is under the surface is that fear they have that I already talked about. The fears of not being liked, the fears of, making enemies or experiencing retaliation, the fears of not having enough money. Those are what's really driving it. So the too busy isn't a direct fear, but it is based in fear, right? So it may come across as, we don't have the energy to do this, and we can't do this and do all the other things we need to do. Like I said, a lot of which might have just got made up in the moment. And all of a sudden it's a new priority. We have to do it right now. So this is a bit manipulative, but it is coming from the fears the controller has of what could possibly go wrong if we don't tolerate abusive environments or situations or relationships. So, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're just like, you know what? I just want to be able to tolerate my life better. And generally speaking, that's a phrase that comes from their controller. Their controller is like, I just need to find a way to quell all this emotion and stop feeling like I need to do something to change my life. And I just need to be better at suppressing how I feel, which is a lot of times what we're saying there. We're saying, I want to tolerate. I want to suppress how I feel. I want to be better at handling this really not so great situation for myself. And that's when we want to really start questioning ourselves. Okay. And be like, why do I want to tolerate it? What's driving my need? What are the fears behind that? And this is where the writing can come in and be our best friend, so to speak, because when we can get, underneath the fears to what's really kind of driving what's going on in our system, we can start to make those kind of short-term changes as opposed to just taking a short-term fix that won't fix anything in the long term. We can make short-term changes that will actually take a lot of energy now, maybe really stress us out as we work through the fear, but in the long term will be a major investment. Now, controller will say investment only applies to money, but I'm saying here, investment applies to your quality of life. And that's really where we need to put some focus, right? We don't need to walk to school in the snow uphill or whatever it is. We don't have to do that. Right? We've left those kind of abusive ways of living behind. We can make new choices. We can do things that are right for ourselves. And that takes a lot of convincing on the controller's part, but we can do that. So that's what I have for you today. I hope you found this helpful, especially if you're facing a situation where you're trying to decide between tolerating abuse and walking away, which means that you're feeling a lot of fear right now. And so let yourself kind of take this in and try some of these writing prompts, these writing exercises that I brought up today so that you can, invest in your future and invest in a better life. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Carol, for being here. Thank you, Trish, for being here. And feel free to ask me any questions. You could also message me. You can email me if you don't want to put a comment here. This is an important topic for us to take in so that we can invest in us, right? So thank you all so much for being here. I'll talk to you next week.